Hello, my name's Emily. I'm an artist and jewellery maker. Welcome back to my channel. Today's video I'm going to be going through all the reference books that most inspire me when I'm looking for references when doing my illustrations or drawings, but even also things like trying to figure out a composition or what I'd like to include in said illustrations. So I thought I'd go through all of these and discuss some of my favourite pages and what I love about them most. The first book is The Incredible Earth by David and Charles, and it's actually a cube book which has a lot of reference pictures, and these reference pictures are really large, fill most of the page and are high quality references. It's also quite a small and compact book, but I really find a lot of these pictures, because of the vibrancy and just how detailed they are, I find them so inspirational. They also include references about where the photos were taken, and I just find that really useful as well when I'm trying to find specific areas that might inspire me within a painting or an illustration. I actually get most of these reference books from charity shops, and I did find this at a charity shop not too long ago. I believe it cost me £1, but if these books are something that you'd be interested in finding your own copy, I'll include what I can in terms of if I can find a link from Amazon. These will be affiliate links, so they won't charge you any extra, but I will earn a small commission, and it's a great way of supporting my channel so I can make more videos like this. I think this is probably one of my favourite pictures. I'm a big lover of things like mountains and volcanoes and all sorts of things like that. So this was a caldera in Mount Kilimanjaro in Tanzania, and I think that's just so cool. I love anything that's kind of destructive and violent when it comes to Mother Nature, but I digress. The next book is The Impressionists by Antonia Cunningham, and these have really nice concise background knowledge about the said artists that are actually featured in here. There's some also really high quality lovely images from different artists, from Edgar Degas to Renoir, and I think it's just a really lovely way of learning a little bit in quite a digestible way about a certain painting or a certain artist or what inspired them within these paintings. But I think it's a really lovely composition of this. So you get a page of information, a lovely image of the painting that they're talking about, and I just find that really nice when I can't take in an overload of information, but I just want to know what's kind of inspired the painting or what was kind of going on behind the scenes when this painting was being created. I think by looking through a lot of these books that I'm going to be featuring in this video, I've realised probably my favourite form of art is Impressionism, because anytime I look at Impressionism pieces or artworks by Impressionist artists, I am just full of inspiration and I just want to create. So I think that's kind of a learning curve for me, realising just how much I love Impressionist pieces. This book is less of a reference for pictures, but more for information that when I'm kind of discovering a composition I'd like to complete involving flowers. So this is Flowerpaedia by Cheralyn and Darcey. And what I like about this book is it has two parts. So it has flowers that you may want to look for with their meanings. But then on the other side, if you're looking for a meaning, you want to kind of capture that with a flower in an illustration, they also have that side of things. So an example of that would be Expanded Horizons, Stargazer Lily, Pink. Now, you know I'm a huge lover of Stargazer Liliums and all things to do with them. I'm actually currently working on a collection of earrings inspired by them. But then you can go on to the Stargazer Lily, Pink in the other side of the book, and it says Expanded Horizons, Abundance, Spontaneity, Wealth, Prosperity and Ambition. So if you wanted to find something, say you're doing a vase of flowers and you want to include some specific themes, but you're unsure about what flowers to include. So that's a great way of actually including that. So say you wanted flowers to exhibit hope. So hawthorn, example, is a branch that, well, not only do goats absolutely love it to eat, it is their chocolate, but you could also include that as like sprigs within other flowers to exhibit hope within a painting as well. So that's why I find this book so useful and interesting. It's a great way of honing in on those themes and making sure everything correlates really well together. The next book is The Secret Lives of Colour by Kassia St. Clair. I actually received this for my birthday a couple of years ago, and I've always been a big lover of colour theory, anything like that. And similar to the Flowerpaedia book, it's a great way of adding a bit of knowledge and insight into a painting. So if you wanted to exhibit a certain theme, you could look through this book and see what colours you could include to get that. But I'm also a bit of a geek when it comes to art history and pigment history especially, so I quite like looking at how these colours became what they were. Also from a collector's perspective, I love how all of these colours match the colour within the pages. I think as a book itself, it's a work of art, and I really enjoy looking at all the colours and finding the right sort of colour that I'm thinking of. I can certainly apply this knowledge into my artwork, but also as another string to my bow with just knowing more about a colour's origin and things like that. I just find that really interesting. I'm a colour geek, shall we say. The next book I'm going to be discussing is The English Lakes by Rob Talbot and Robin Whiteman, and I do have a personal interest in the Lake District as I do have family living there, so to have this book is very useful, not only because I find looking at the places that I've been and learning extra information about those places. I also absolutely love a map like this, nice and easy to read and digestible. I do really struggle with the Ordnance Survey maps. That could be down to the fact that I did A-level geography and that was somewhat traumatic. I digress. I really enjoy looking at all of the different places within the Lake District, and it's an absolutely gorgeous part of our country, so having little reference pictures and some information about that to include in my illustrations and paintings I really enjoy. Ambleside especially is a huge love of mine. This bridge house is one I've seen many a time and I think it's just so unique and gorgeous. I love quaint, quirky places like this. And there's also a cafe not too far from there that is called the Apple Pie Cafe, and it is absolutely gorgeous. I also really liked this picture. It is a view of Keswick from Luttrig, and I've actually, before I became disabled, climbed Luttrig and saw this very view, so I think that was definitely a way of knowing I certainly needed to buy this book, and I think it was 50p from a charity shop, so I couldn't say no. There's also lovely places that I've not been to but I've heard my family talk about, so I think it's just really nice to have this book, not only for artistic references but also for personal interests as well, because these are places frequently discussed and I'd like to know more about them. The next book is The Book of British Villages, and not only does this book include gorgeous illustrations and information about what makes a village and things to look for in villages like types of masonry and roofing and things like that, which I really like, and all of these are illustrations as well. There's also not too much information to sift through where it becomes overwhelming for me to read, so I do quite like learning more about this, but I think when there's masses and masses of paragraphs I really struggle and get very overwhelmed, but that was like the perfect sort of amount to read, to know more about that, but then also not feel completely swamped with information. There's also gorgeous pages like this which are almost like collage pages of elements synonymous with certain villages, so like almost landmarks that you know from those certain villages. There's also gorgeous double page spreads, like look at this, it's like a stately home with an architecture, something I've always been very interested in, and not just British architecture but other types of architecture as well, like the inspirations behind what makes stately homes and stuff. But then there's also massive amounts of villages included within this book with little information paragraphs about said villages. Again, nice and easy to read and digest, so it's just a perfect book, and I think I got it for a whole £2. The next book is Fairy Art by Iain Zaczek, and this book is just gorgeous. I mean, I know I'm saying this about all these books, but I wouldn't be buying them if I wasn't really interested in the things included. But there's some really beautiful paintings that I've actually not heard of before. And when I was a child, I was all for the fairy paintings like Cicely Mary Barker, who I will include later. But the spreads in these pages are just absolutely gorgeous. There's so much whimsy and beauty within these, and I think it is just so inspiring to me. I love anything that's kind of mythical and mystical. I'm also very much into the paranormal side of things as well, but this is definitely more of the lighter genre of the mystical, whimsical world. Within this book there are specific chapters on certain artists that are very well known within the fairy art genre, so for example Richard Doyle, and it'll go through not only the paintings that have been included in this but also the information behind the artists as well and what inspired them. I think just how large this book as well really does show the artworks within this book in such a gorgeous light. They are just beautiful for references, and I think just by looking through all of these pages I'm so inspired. Also, I'm so sorry if you can hear creaking. My desk has gone really creaky all of a sudden, and I don't know why. I think it might be the fact that the weather has gone very damp and very cold all of a sudden, but that's what you can hear if there's anything like creaky or squeaky. Speaking of squeaky, the guinea pigs are very much having a good natter as well, so if you can hear that as well, that is just the general antics of the bungalow. This is the painting that was featured on the front cover, which definitely made me so intrigued by more about the book. It had an air of like Renaissance to it, but with more of a whimsical touch, which I just was really inspired by. I love it when things like cross over with that, with themes that kind of have been heavily inspired by something but are in a completely different era. I loved this as well because there's elements of Shakespeare, and I'm a bit of a Shakespeare geek as well. Performing arts does that to you, but there's nods of kind of whimsy within that as well. So for example, Midsummer's Night Dream, and having that within this book, I was just obsessed. So I think I was reading this book in the charity shop for a good few minutes and I was like, you know what, it's £1, I'm just going to get it. The next book is Castles by Donald Sommerville, and you have been warned, this is a very tall book, and it barely fits in my tall bookshelf. So I have quite a large kind of depth within a shelf, and it still doesn't fit. I should probably actually store it horizontally. I think that would work a lot better because it's very, very big, but with good reason. The pictures are absolutely stunning. I do find there's a little bit of wasted space within these books because there's not a lot of information on certain castles, where there's quite a lot of space of just blank pages. Pictures are beautiful, so I'm really happy that I've got that for references, but I would have liked a bit more, maybe not necessarily information, but better use of the pages. For such a big kind of tall book, there's a lot of wasted space, like I said, so that's just my only kind of criticism. But for £1, who am I to complain? The pictures are beautiful. Most of the castles in this book are British, but there are some nods of castles within Europe as well. And I think it's interesting to see how certain elements of architecture cross over, and like the inspirations behind certain castles in the media, like for example, Disney castles. A lot of these castles are actually inspired by that. And I think that's really interesting as well, like the architecture itself being used as inspiration far beyond the years of the architect, and probably what the architect didn't actually expect the architecture to be used for, but I think that's just so cool. The next book is one of the books that definitely inspires me the quickest, and it's the Complete Book of Poses for Artists by Ken Goldman and Stephanie Goldman. And I just have to look at maybe a composition or setup of a human body, and I feel like, oh, they could be wearing this, or they could be doing that, or the background behind them could be this. I think generally people never fail to inspire me, and I think it's important to kind of represent a personality within these characters themselves as well. But even then, if I'm struggling to find inspiration of a certain part of a certain painting, I think Pinterest really helps. So I could see a pose or one of the poses within this book and then kind of research some inspiration on Pinterest or things like that, and I can create a painting or an illustration quite quickly after that. One thing I like about this book is that there are some actual photographs for references, but there's also examples of drawings, and the drawings are really easy to see. You can see all of the kind of the mark making and how everything was built up. There's some simplistic tones, but then there's also a lot more detail in certain elements as well, which I really like. It just has a vast array of what you can use within your own paintings. It kind of can appeal to all different types of artists, and there's a lot of different formats, from people lying down, sitting down, posing with objects, but also movement as well. I think dancing is something that really inspires me from personal experience, but also the costumes, how the bodies look. It's like the extremes of what a body can do and what that can convey, the fluidity. It's just so inspiring to me. So that's why this book is just such an easy way for me to feel inspired. And like I was saying as well, ways of kind of showing mood and emotion. It goes beyond just like how a body looks in this book. I think it's interesting to see how you can kind of depict a certain mood by just a position, kind of even looking at body language. I think it's just such a clever way of interpreting a body in so many more ways than just how it looks. As previously mentioned, in going through these books, I realised that Impressionism paintings are something that I'm very, very fond of and definitely inspire me a lot. So when I saw this book in a charity shop, well, it had to come home with me. Again, another charity shop bargain, and this is the Impressionists and Post-Impressionist paintings by C. Moffett. And this book is just... There are some classic artists from the Impressionist period, like Edgar Degas, who did the ballet dancers, but there's also artists that I weren't overly familiar with. So there's a painting by Manet, and it's actually of Claude Monet and his wife and his child, which I was so it was almost like an artist inception. And it allowed me to discover Edward Manet as a painter in his own right. And I think to see how Monet as well lived so closely with Manet, both location-wise but also emotionally. And I think seeing this painting allowed me to want to learn more about that. And there's also other artists in this book, from Pissarro and Renoir, Cézanne. I think I'm just obsessed with having such a thick, chunky book with all of the artists that I think exude everything that I look for in art and everything that really does inspire me, from mark making to colour palettes, and how there's elements of realism within that, but doing it in your own way, but there's like a therapeutic nod to it as well. I think I've really found my favourite form of artwork nowadays, and that will ebb and flow and change and things, but I'm really just so enjoying this part of learning that art doesn't have to be so realistic, and how you can really just enjoy the process, and that can be visible within your paintings as well, having that sort of playful naivety to a painting. And really enjoying that aspect in others' paintings has allowed me to kind of want to have that in my own pieces as well. I think out of all of the books mentioned in this video, this is probably one of the ones that just sparks so much joy for me, and I think allowed me to really envisage what I love art to be in terms of the references and research, but also what I want in my own artwork. I think it's been a very valuable addition to my collection of books. The next book is The British Isles, A Symphony of Colour by David Gibbon. And this is a book I've actually seen a few times now on other people's channels. I believe Katie Moody references this book quite a lot in her sketchbook, and she is like a sketchbook queen. So if this book's good for her, I'll take it. But this book's really interesting because there's a lot of smaller pictures with different parts of the British Isles. There are some pages that are just fully pictures. There are some pages that have different parts of the British Isles. There's also chapters from Scotland, Ireland, Wales and England as well. So it is split up into that way, which I find it a lot more easy to kind of find my way. There's some beautiful pictures that just spark so much inspiration, especially anything country and cottagecore. I am all for. I love a thatched roof and a cottage garden, so what more could you want when you see this double page spread? I feel like I just am so inspired. This is a very interesting picture. This is actually the longest named town, and this is the railway station. Just look at that sign. I mean, I'm not even going to attempt to pronounce that. I think there's been a few people on BBC News that have had to pronounce it, and fair play to them. I actually saw this picture of the smallest house in Great Britain. I've actually been there. It's in Conwy, and literally you go up the staircase and you can just about fit your head through. And I visited there when I was a child and I still thought it was small, so that's just how small it is. But there's some beautiful pictures of the landscapes as well. I feel like this could be me in a past life or even in the future, of just sitting by a lake, plain air. What more could you want? And finally we have A Flower Fairy's Treasury by Cicely Mary Barker. You've probably seen this book in a recent art supply playtime where I did one of my art mason jars inspired by artists, and it was The Geranium Fairy by Cicely Mary Barker. And this book was featured, but there's just so much joy that this book has, and the paintings themselves are beautiful. There's a poem for every fairy. Fuchsias generally always remind me of dancers. Sweet peas have a lovely memory for me as well. We actually had a guinea pig called Sweet Pea, so definitely a flower that definitely makes me feel very happy and joyful. And I think the poetry itself is something I'm also interested in. I do like the written word. I like writing poetry myself, so having these as references, not only as poetry but also for colour palettes, paintings. I absolutely adore the illustrative style. It's so whimsical. It's got so much kind of playfulness and innocence that kind of childhood exhibits, and to have that in illustrative forms of such beautiful pieces of artwork, I'm just obsessed, and it's a lovely addition to my collection. But that is the end of this video. I really hope you enjoyed this video. If you like this video or like me, please subscribe to my channel. I would love to have you here and join me on all of my arty endeavours. I do have a couple of other books that I do enjoy using for things like this, but I'm thinking of maybe saving these to do another part 2 when I have a couple of extra books that I could include, so we can see other aspects of what I find enjoyable. So there's a lot of things like superstitions and folklore that I really enjoy, but not everyone is interested in that. But same with tarot cards. I do have quite a few decks that also spark a lot of inspiration. If you would like to see a video like that, do let me know, but I know it's not for everyone. That being said, if you want to see it, I will happily oblige. There is some other videos coming up. I've been working on a couple of projects in the meantime. My partner is now back at school teaching the maths, so I will have a bit more time to film and get some stuff done for the business. There's also some Christmas stuff coming up very soon, which, yes, it is getting that time of year. That is terrifying, but there will be some updates on that as well. And the classic favourites video and stuff as well, so I'm accumulating some things for that as well. But that is the end of this video. I really hope you have a truly magical rest of your day. Please stay safe out there, and I'll see you in the next one. Bye!